there, so lovely small, with nations free, with people French and Dutch, though talking English much, as decent Martin in the sea. Oh, sweet St. Martin's land, so bright thy beach and strand, with sailors on the sea and harbors free, where the chains of mountains green furiously in sunlight sheen. Oh, I love thy paradise, nature's beauty very nice. Oh, I love thy paradise, nature's beauty very nice.
Prime Minister Jacobs, I invite you to give your address.
Thank you very much to the moderator this morning. It is my great pleasure, most humble pleasure, to stand here before you this morning and welcome you to this SEDEMA conference being held here on St. Martin, 11th SEDEMA conference. Just before entering, I was able to make the acquaintance of the dignitaries seated on the podium with me, and I would like to give another big warm welcome to them, as they are really the ambassadors of this conference. A great big welcome to all of the delegates from the 18 countries that have come to St. Martin's shores 2 years post-Hurricane Irma and Maria, after the devastation we have faced. It is with great pleasure because yesterday we celebrated, as a government of St. Martin, the 20th year of celebrating our Thanksgiving, the end of the hurricane season. For the past 20 years, we have been doing so, whether we've been hit by hurricanes or not. And the theme of that was that God is good. He is always good, and his mercies endure forever. So whether we are facing perilous times or in good times, we give him praise, we give him thanks, we give him all the glory. And that's why even though you might wonder as to why we would have an invocation at such a ceremony, we always invoke the will of God in our ceremonies here on St. Martin. It is basically part of our culture. I would like to thank SEDEMA for accepting that St. Martin would be organizing together with them the 11th CDM conference. The 18 participating states are truly welcome, and I'm hoping that based on the agenda that I've seen and heard, that the actions coming forward will benefit this entire region and create bridges that will last for a lifetime between the Caribbean and the rest of the world. The local coordinators, Emilia Thomas Connor, Rodney Richardson, Paul Martins, Clive Richardson, and many others who have helped to work together with Andrea Grosvenor and her team to bring SEDEMA to St. Martin. I am truly grateful on behalf of the government of St. Martin. Resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. It means bouncing back from difficult experiences. Research has shown that resilience is ordinary, not extraordinary. People commonly demonstrate resilience, and that can be demonstrated and visualized in how St. Martin bounced back after 2017, being hit by 2 hurricanes of Category 5+. As far as we're concerned, it was Category 7. Many do not know or cannot imagine how some people felt, the lack of communication on the island to the outside world, unknowing as to where our other partners stood within the region and how quickly help would get here. We can prepare, but the individual human being, the resilience within that one person can make the difference in the recovery. And that is why St. Martin can still stand today, even though we can all look back and say we were ill prepared for the devastation that hit back in September of 2017. From these conferences, we hope that we can grow and be better prepared, not just in advance of the storm, but in direct actions after the storm, in direct recovery and resilience projects that do not see the delays that can take place due to procurement processes. Procurement processes are actually necessary, yes, but after a storm of the massive devastation that we see, we must be able to fast-track such processes to get the recovery going at a much faster pace. Thank God for the beautiful location that God has granted St. Martin, that the humans, the businesses, the communities, the individual people, and of course the immediate emergency help to get us back where we are today. We are still a far way off from full recovery, and the most vulnerable in our society continue to struggle. However, plans coming out of these types of conferences and future conferences, working visits, and collaborations will see improvements in these areas, not just for Sweet St. Martin, but for the entire region and thereby benefit the world. Mr. Baptiste, in his prayer this morning, talked about the different types of devastation. That's only a drop in the bucket. Pandemic-type devastations can also wreak havoc, especially on a country like St. Martin that sees cruise tourism and having over 2 million passengers passing through our shores just for the day. Any disease can be dropped off. How do we handle those? Those can also be disasters. And that's why I'm very happy that not only Caribbean contributors, but contributors from around the world will be assisting in making this conference a success. I myself will also be participating on Friday with some of the other ministers here present. And so I look forward to making my contribution. Before leaving the podium here today, as I mentioned to some of my colleagues, duty does call, and when Parliament of St. Martin calls, ministers have to answer. And it is also very, very important topics that I'm being called to Parliament for in the recovery and rebuilding of our airport, which serves as a hub function for also other countries and islands in our close proximity. We must secure the funding for that, and for that I must ask your indulgence that you will be excusing me in a few minutes. But before leaving, I must say a special, special welcome as a former educator, as a mother, as a youth activist. I would like to say welcome, a great big welcome to all the youth delegates who are here to discourse, have their voices be heard, and contribute to the plans of disaster planning and management moving forward in how we can help our communities to rebuild with resiliency and strength. Without the voice of the youth, all plans made here would be for naught. So I applaud SEDEMA in involving the youth in these conference discussions, dialogue, and action plans. Thank you very much to all who are in attendance. May this conference yield all that it is expected to yield tenfold. Welcome to St. Martin.
Our next speaker is Mr. Ronald Jackson, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA. Mr. Ronald Jackson has more than 16 years' experience in disaster risk management within the Caribbean. He is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency and has served in the capacity of Director General and Deputy Director General of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management in Jamaica. He has lent his expertise to the coordination of national responses to the impact of Hurricanes Charlie and Ivan in 2004, Dennis and Emily in 2005, Tropical Depression 16, and subsequently Tropical Storm Nicole in 2010, and most recently, Hurricane Sandy in 2012. He has been instrumental in the development of guidelines for child safety disaster management and response. In 2010, Mr. Jackson received the Certificate of Commendation from the Caribbean community for his contribution to the rescue and recovery efforts in the aftermath of the January 2010 Haiti earthquake. He lectures on disaster risk management in the Tourism and Occupational Health and Safety Master's Program of the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill and Mona, respectively. Mr. Jackson also serves as president of the IDB Caribbean Policy Dialogue Forum and is co-chair of the Inter-American Network of Disaster Management and represented the Caribbean Disaster Management Agency member states on the now this one's kind of stumped me, HYOGO Network for Action Midterm Review Committee and the post-2015 HYOGO Network for Action Committee and the consultations for the World Humanitarian Summit 2016. He was named patron for the School of Building and Land Management for the University of Technology in March 27, 2013. Mr. Jackson holds a science degree in Natural Resource Management and Environmental Resource Management from the University of West Indies and a Bachelor of Science degree in Physical Planning and Environmental Resource Development from the University of Technology, and a Master's Certificate in Monitoring, Evaluation, and Reporting. Please help me welcome Mr. Jackson.
Honorable Prime Minister of St. Martin, Silvera Jacobs, Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, Barbados, Minister Edmund G. Hinkson, and representing our Council of Ministers of SEDEMA, His Excellency Ambassador Fernando Ponce Canto, Ambassador Extraordinaire and Plenipotentiary of the European Union to Guyana, Suriname, and the Dutch Overseas Territories, Mr. Reuben Meade, former Prime Minister of Montserrat, distinguished representatives and heads of regional organizations and international organizations, distinguished representatives from development banks, representatives from the ACS, development partners, national disaster coordinators, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and in the event I've left anyone out, friends all, good morning to you. I am indeed excited at the historic first staging of the CDM conference, Caribbean Conference for Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management, here in St. Martin. It's a historic moment because we've never, since the inception of the conference, been hosted in an overseas territory. But I'm also excited by the prospects that hosting here in St. Martin has also brought to the conference. We've seen many firsts when we look at the diversity of participation. We have with us Cayman, we have Bermuda, we have the Dutch Overseas Territories. We have a wider diversity in terms of the actors, both at state level and sectoral level, participating with us at this year's conference. We have the largest delegation of local government representatives representing their municipalities here at the conference, and I don't want to say the country, even though I will, because I might seem biased, but the representation is coming out of Jamaica, which is also going to be the staging of next year's platform, regional platform for disaster risk reduction, another historic first for the Caribbean. So the Caribbean is going to be hosting the Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction for the first time in the history. Is this me, Paul? For the first time in the history of the event in the Caribbean. So we're having the event here in St. Martin at a very, very important juncture, a juncture where the region itself is maturing in the delivery of the agenda towards resilience, but also as we embark on another journey towards advancing a regional resilience agenda occasioned on the outcomes of the 2017 event. But even as we sit this week to deliberate, we have to spare a thought to those families in the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama who were impacted by Hurricane Dorian and are also themselves caught up in the throes of recovery. We say we are resilient people, but that does not negate the fact that these events do set back our communities, or people, or ambitions towards development. And so we have to spare a thought for these individuals as they go through their particular journey to recover. As I said before, the region is maturing. We've been at this business for quite some time. We can go back to the 70s when we started our formal arrangements around disaster risk reduction. But I think if we want to look at a landmark moment, then we have to reflect on the birth of comprehensive disaster management within the region, which was in 2001. We're now at 2019, and we have made significant advances, and some of us may doubt that we have done so, but all of the evidence, all of the empirical evidence we've been tracking suggests that as a region, we are advancing. We're indeed advancing. But the question weighing on our minds must be today, if we're advancing, why do we see the sort of losses? Why do we see the impact we've seen in 2017 here in St. Martin, in Dominica, in the BVI? Why have we seen the losses that we have seen in the Bahamas, in those two islands we spoke of, as a result of Dorian? Why is this happening? And the answer to that question is simply this. It's very clear for me that we've not done enough in tackling what I consider the underlying risk drivers. So we have been working, we have been developing strategies, we have been developing policies, we've been developing laws, we've been training. And so in that regard, we have made some advancements. But if we're truly going to be successful in treating with this issue of natural hazards impact, which we're so vulnerable to, if we're truly going to be successful in dealing with the specter of climate change, then we have to begin to look at these underlying drivers of risk and to begin to target our investments into treating with them. And that has set the center stage for what we call our Caribbean Resilience Pathway. And I won't go into that because I know other speakers will speak to that. But that pathway is really seeking to bring us towards greater investment and focus on tackling those underlying risk drivers. We have articulated the pathway, and we're on this pace of continuing to socialize it amongst our many constituents, including the heads of government who themselves approved it in 2018. But we need to continue to bring this full and frontal in the fight towards our resilience agenda. I want to pause here because we must acknowledge, and I think the Honorable Prime Minister did, the participation of our youth delegates. But as I spoke to the pathway, I was reminded that they are not only passengers on this journey, they're not passive passengers on this journey. They're very active participants in the framing of the agenda. In fact, when we developed the resilience pathway, our youth delegates sat shoulder to shoulder with 7 ministers of government and technical representatives from the World Bank and the CDB and SEDEMA, and they were very vocal, very articulate in drafting and framing the ideas that gave rise to the resilience pathway. So our young people are not just a token when we say youth are the future. They've been very active, and so we want to welcome, especially welcome our youth delegates. I see that most of them are sitting there. I see some people in the midst of them, I believe, suggesting that they are young people. For example, I see former Prime Minister Ruben Meade among them. Sir, you're still a youth. I take that point. But I think they're all gathered there, and we're looking forward to engaging and working with them over the course of this week. They will bring great value to our plans and our deliberations. So we take note that we're doing much, but we must do more. And as a region, we must take a stronger role. We must have a stronger voice in our risk governance. Far too often, our risk governance is being driven by external actors. The time has come for us to take the leadership role in our risk governance. And so one of the challenges that I will put out to both our political leaders here, and more to join us, but also our technical leaders and supporters of our political directorate, that we must become greater architects in the framing of our agenda going forward, and to bring along our donor partners in that particular journey, but we must be in the lead. So 2017 events have sharpened the focus on the Caribbean, and we see many actors coming onto the landscape to join those of us who are already in this space. It has created a heightened expectation, I think, within the region, given the widening pool of collaborators. But we must not forget that as a region, we also have small states. And so there is an issue, not necessarily with capacity, because across the region we have the intelligentsia, we have the capacity, but the absorptive capacity must be borne in mind. Because even as CDEMA, where we have a fairly sized staff, we are ourselves challenged with the plethora of actors that are coming into the field and seeking to contribute and to support. We must remember the bandwidth, and I'm not for any moment saying that you should not come in and you should not support, but I think what it requires us to do is to look very carefully at how we engage so as to maximize and to be efficient with that support that we seek to deliver. We cannot be driven by fear of the loss of our relevance, as that approach will only lead to a waste and ultimately much longer timelines for achieving the resilience building. In my closing, I want to really acknowledge the theme, the Road to Resilience, Checkpoint 2019, which is looking at safeguarding our communities, our livelihoods, and our economies. And I think that is one of the key pillars of the resilience pathway that we ought to focus on, because unless we're able to take our people out of poverty, unless we're able to move them out of the vulnerable context that they're in, we're going to continue to see significant impact. And so the agenda for this week is going to feature quite a bit of innovative conversations, research work. We started yesterday with a pre-conference activity looking at the forensic analysis of recovery, which I thought was a very innovative approach to looking at this issue being delivered through the partnership between UWI and the Overseas Development Institute. So we're going to see more of this creative thinking and assessment and interrogation, and I'm encouraging you to engage in those conversations, because as a region, we continue to be a leader, we continue to be a living laboratory in giving birth to new ideas. One of the new ideas that was born in the Caribbean after 2017 was the Caribbean Resilient Recovery Facility. This and its associated components will provide certainly for a future where the region will not only be able to take charge of its recovery agenda, but by the very nature of institutionalizing recovery within the region, drive down the level of exposure and vulnerability. So as I've said before, CDM, since its inception, has been the birthplace of great creativity, and I'm expecting that at CDM 11, here in St. Martin, for the historic first time, that creativity and innovation will continue. In closing, I want to thank our sponsors and the EU, Canada, CRIF, am I leaving anyone out? UNICEF, how could I forget UNICEF, a very strong and long-standing partner. And all those other sponsors who have supported us in ensuring that this event happens. I want to thank the government of St. Martin, the previous Prime Minister, Prime Minister Marlin, but also a hallmark of a good leader is that they identify the good things and they continue it. So I want to thank you, Madam Prime Minister, for coming on board and engaging and ensuring that the event continued even in the midst of leadership changes. I want to thank my team, led by my executive assistant, Miss Maria Corbin. Is she in the room? No, she's not in the room. And ably supported by my Deputy Executive Director, Elizabeth Riley, and Andrea Grosvenor. You notice I said my executive assistant was the leader, and ably assisted by the senior team, including myself. That's the environment we engender within CDEMA. And so I'm very proud of the team and what they've been able to do in delivering the event and in working with the team from St. Martin. I think we're going to have a fantastic event. But I also want to thank you, the delegates, for taking time out to come and to participate and to engage. I look forward to seeing you over the week. Thank you very much.